Hello, good people, and welcome to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we cover role-playing video games in depth. A friend of mine said, I didn't realize you mostly covered RPGs, and I said, don't you hear what I say at the beginning of every podcast? I am your host, and the drinking hot beer in a sauna of this operation, Braden Arbitrary Water Redacted. Joining me is the hanging out and looking at the sky when it gets dark at 3 p.m. of this podcast, Chris Zombie Pie Redacted.
My parents' cat's favorite handheld console is the PSP. I only have to mention a few times, and he comes running.
Further joining us is the Sam Lakes changing hairstyles of this podcast, Adam Borgmaster Redacted.
I was killed in one hit by a slime earlier.
What do all of these things have in common, you may ask? They all originate from the nation of Finland. Much like our next, much like the subject of today's episode, the Nokia N-Gage and the RPGs therein. You can find us on the internet. You can support us on the Patreon at patreon.com/deeplistens. We are dangerously close to having to play Lunar Dragon Song. The main podcast is going to play Duke Nukem forever. And Gino's going to be like, I thought it was bad. And he's right for once.
We have to force Gino to finish the game, though.
It's like 7 hours.
That's cruel.
Well,
and
sure. Sure, yes, it's short, but also it's a painful short.
Damn. These listens are getting deep.
I wonder how he reacts to that elevator sequence.
I can't believe I'm being forced to listen to these people talk about video games. And I'm all out of
Video games? Yeah.
Video games.
So, the Nokia N-Gage.
Yeah, you hear about this thing?
Okay, for all the Zoomers in the audience, what's a Nokia?
Okay,
man.
So Nokia was, and I believe still is, one of Finland's biggest companies. I believe they were Finland's biggest company in, let's say, the 2000s. They made the cell phones. Before there were smartphones, before there were even Blackberries. You usually had a Nokia phone. I had my very first cell phone.
Yeah.
That I had for about a week before I instead got my sister's cell phone. Was a gray rectangular brick. Roughly the size of my hand. And that was my cellular device.
Could you watch YouTube on it? Could you watch that Skibbity on it?
Let me tell you about T9 texting, young one. It's good that it's gone.
Hey, but you could play Nokia Snake, and that was the first maybe viral mobile-based video game of its time. But yeah, cell phones, not the death knell to video games as a culture or video game development as we know it. Instead, considered like, hey, you're probably in an environment where you only have your phone. What if you could play a little time waster
or if you played
on
Snake.
your phone?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hear me out, younguns. Back before you just set your phone to vibrate only, it would go da 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 da, and that was like the Nokia phone ringtone.
Mm-hmm.
So in the early 2000s, these really smart people, one of the biggest communication companies in the world. Surely this won't end in a kind of disappointing, underwhelming way. They said, what if we got into the video game industry?
Mm-hmm.
And
What if you... Yeah. What if you
Go ahead.
tried to make a phone that more was aimed towards people who like portable things, and it was more about playing video games, but you could still press it to your face to make phone calls? Right?
Crazy
Okay.
idea.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be
Who
a
would
really
want that?
smart idea.
I can't see that going anywhere.
Well, unfortunately for this one, you had to press it to your face to where it felt like you were putting a Choco Taco to your face.
Yeah, so anyone in our audience who is let's say under the age of 30 or is not a weird freak like we are, I highly suggest you look up both the original model of the N-Gage and the QD model that they released a year later and see how you were supposed to use that thing as a phone.
Mm-hmm.
Because you held it sideways.
Side talking.
Side talking. Like a Choco Taco, as a great man once said.
Jeff
It also
Gerstmann and
doesn't-
Ryan Davis, to be
Yes.
specific.
It also doesn't help that it's taco shaped.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just taco shaped in general.
Yeah, and we won't talk about how the num keys are shaped like a certain popular
so we'll
internet
we'll
image.
get to that when we talk
Okay.
about how these games controlled. But just to kind of like talk about what the N-Gage was like. So it had a directional pad on a part of it to where it was kind of, well, not kind of. It was aiming for the OG Game Boy Advance people. So it had a green button to call phones or to make calls or to dial. Then it had a hang up button. It had listen to MP3s, which were usually like a card or like, I think SIM cards are still a thing where you would just put in a card full of MP3s and you would listen to the music that you put into your N-Gage. There was a radio button, and then there was a shuffle button. And above that was a discus, kind of like a 360 controller D-pad. And instead of having an analog stick or anything like that, you had the numpads, alphanumeric 1 through 9, including 0 and pound, as well as star, for making phone calls.
And also that numpad was on the right hand side where like the A and B button would be on a GBA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was awkward to use as a phone, but it was even worse with its original incarnation to play video games because, as covered in a pretty well-known video by A1 Jeff Gerstmann, where he's reviewing the N-Gage as a device, in the very first version of the N-Gage, what you would have to do is you would have to flip it over to the back, pop open the back exterior clamshell backside, pull the entire battery out, pull the game cartridge holder or, the thing that would hold the games, put in or swap the game that you want in, put that back into it, then reinsert the battery, put the backside of the clamshell on as well, and then boot the entire thing up just to play video games.
Or to
Every
change
single
video
time you wanted to change a game.
So clearly you weren't meant to change games that often.
No, even though, and this is
The
something
handheld
that,
device.
someone who really knew it at the time, Nokia was committed to this device well beyond when, we've seen devices and platforms where a publisher releases hardware and they immediately realizes, this is a boondoggle, we got to cut bait. Like Nokia was committed to the N-Gage for years. So much so that Marino of Giant Bomb fame, well-known wiki editor and wiki moderator, has like visual evidence that Nokia paid a lot of money to have these really elaborate and well-decorated and planned booths at E3 and all of the major conventions, CES, where they really wanted to make a strong first impression that the Nokia N-Gage was something that they truly cared about. And this device comes out, and it immediately doesn't sell. There are a handful of reasons. I think the first one, Borg, you were kind of talking about is, A, they were targeting the Game Boy Advance, but the SP was already coming out.
And
So,
the DS was on its way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess for timeline's sake, this is the fall of 2003. So
Yeah.
they had seen the GBA come out. It was like, what, 2001? Like the Taco GBA. It had problems. People were mad about some things. They're like, aha, vulnerability. We can get in on this. So they make a phone that's also a handheld, but the battery comes out to change the cards. And it has a number pad instead of A and B buttons. But they release it the same season that the GBA SP comes out, and only 1 year before the DS comes out. And also the PSP was announced at E3 in 2003 as well. So everyone knows that there's way better stuff than the Taco GBA on the way soon and in the future. And then Nokia comes in with this handheld gaming device that's also a bad cell phone that you need a phone plan to buy. And it's more expensive than the GBA. It's more expensive than the GBSP by a lot because it's a phone. And if you try to buy it at a GameStop, you have to go to like an AT&T or Verizon store or wherever to like get a phone plan activated before you could use it. The whole thing's a mess.
Yeah, they didn't sell this at GameStops. They sold this at phone stores.
Oh
Yeah.
no! They did sell them at GameStops and EB Games, but you couldn't activate them.
Oh,
You had to get you
GameStop.
could buy the device, you could buy the hardware, and then you would have to bring it to a
you
phone
would have to get a phone
area.
plan.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you had to connect it to a phone plan before it was workable.
At like a separate
usable.
store.
Tremendous.
So, clunky execution of something where maybe there was a crease for something that was intended for the gaming crowd in their phones. Then again, like you said, the SP comes out, immediately eviscerates the market that they were aiming for, which is disaffected GBA fans. And then the DS gets announced, and then the PSP gets announced. At that point, you would think that you would just cut bait and pull out of the market with this hardware that is not moving any significant amount of hardware. And yet, Nokia sinks in another batch of R&D, tells the N-Gage team, we're going to give you one shot, make the device better, but essentially gave them a blank check to make a second version.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be the N-Gage QD came out, I think, in
QD.
summer or fall of 2004. It's better. You know, it actually has a cart slot in it. It's not a taco phone anymore. You can hold it, you know, the screen to your face. It runs better. It's better shaped a bit. It just improves on the hardware.
It had better multiplayer connectivity.
Yeah, they got rid of like the FM radio thing. They put in like actual buttons for games.
Yeah.
So it's a better piece of hardware in general. It's what the N-Gage should have been at launch. But this is now 2004, and the DS is coming out.
Yeah, so it is. Even though it shows potential of addressing all of the problems and maybe, you know, being better hardware, it is still unfortunately too little too late. And yet, they still sunk in millions of dollars into trying to promote it in hopes of like moving the needle at least moderately. Because unfortunately for Nokia, the N-Gage is kind of like the beginning of the end for them, where Symbian is quickly going to lose its dominant market share as the dominant preferred OS in the mobile field to Android and iOS. With the introduction of the Razr and then eventually the iPhone, they lose so much.
Yeah.
They lose so much of their market share of the mobile field.
Because the Razr came out in what, 2006?
Yes.
2005? And yeah, that just killed them. And
Yes.
then Apple came in and just two to the back of the head, Nokia sold off to Microsoft.
And that was just a death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
Microsoft thought, okay, so Symbian's dead. We want you to be the marquee brand for Microsoft Mobile and Windows Mobile
Phone.
OS. And it's like, all right, you're giving us a already dead on arrival operating system for mobile and an ecosystem that has like a quarter of all of the features of Android and iOS. So obviously, this is going to fail. And it's a massive write-off from Microsoft.
Yeah, and the N-Gage was dead by the end of 06. It lasted until the end of 06, which is shocking.
A whole 3 million units sold.
And so we're looking at the sales in North America, it's like the thousands. When we're looking at Europe, it's the hundreds of thousands, and in Asia Pacific, that's where like 80% of the sales were. And that was as a phone. I don't think anyone cared about it as a game platform.
Yeah.
In
So
like Japan and Taiwan. And,
Although
the GBA sold 81 million.
Yeah, because it's an actual handheld that does the function, and in general, controls okay.
Yeah.
The ESP is better, but it's still fine.
I think there's one last thing about the design of this thing that we're bearing the lead on, and it's the screen on this thing is the same dimension as a regular vertical cell phone screen. It is a 2-inch screen that is 11 by 13 is the aspect ratio. And then the actual resolution is 176 by 208. So it's tall.
Oh, yeah.
And also it's tiny.
What I think was even more insulting is most of the games that we played were letterboxed and or had borders on them because the developers were clearly making games with, say, a GBA aspect ratio in mind, and this is not the same screen, and so you get even less real estate whenever you're playing the games that you're playing.
Like it was either letterboxed or they did the thing that happened with like the first generation of DVDs when they went from like widescreen to like full screen, where they'll just cut off the edges to like make it like
it's like the full screen widescreen
4:3
debate all over again, huh?
Yeah. So they did, so some of the games did that, like your Tony Hawk's or your Tomb Raiders, your downports of PS1 games did it that way. Where like some of the GBA ports were just like you said, letterboxed. Which
I wonder. I mean, we found some games. I mean, you two did a deeper dive than I did in terms of playing the other games on the N-Gage, but I can imagine. So hardware-wise, it was stronger than a GBA, or was it weaker than a GBA?
It was stronger than the GBA.
Yeah, because you can play PS1 games.
Yeah, there are a handful of PS1 games that were there at launch. If you want to play a very compromised version of Tomb Raider, which weird homebrewers apparently have gotten a version of Tomb Raider to run on the GBA, because of course they have. But Tony Hawk 1. There's a version of Tony Hawk 1 on the N-Gage with some truly catastrophic draw distance and
1 song per level. And I mean, I can just talk about that port of Tony Hawk all episode if you want.
Tony Hawk is it's not an RPG. It's a lifestyle.
So how's that version of Tony Hawk? Why is it cursed?
They cut down the number of tapes per level. The grinding is non-functional because there's no grind meter, and trying to grind with the 4 and 6 keys, it just doesn't work. It's too sensitive. So you grind for about 1/4 the distance that you can on the PS1, and so some of the grinding parts of the levels just don't work. Like the secret tape in the mall, it's just you're not getting it. You're just not getting it. And trying to like do combos is like out of the question. All right, you're going to do vert tricks, and that's it. So that makes some of the later game score attack stuff especially tricky because you get diminishing returns on a vert because you're supposed to do vert and street, right? You're supposed to mix it up. But when you get to later competitions, it's like no, I can only just string together flips and grabs because I can grind for 1.5 seconds before wiping out. It makes the game non-functional, like on a conceptual level.
Yeah.
And the key problem is that
Also, it doesn't have Superman by Goldfinger.
Yeah, it also doesn't have Superman. But this is going to be something that we talk about with virtually every game. Playing these games with a numeric keyboard meant for making phone calls sucks. Like there's no
Yeah, those are not buttons meant for in-depth high responsivity.
I don't even like if you wanted this to be taken even moderately seriously as a game thing, they should have just put an A and a B button instead of like maybe even I would have taken slightly below where the alphanumeric keys were, like just anywhere. But
Like
they
the black
didn't.
and white button on Xbox controller.
Yeah, like anywhere. Like I would have taken the black and white jelly bean buttons on an Xbox controller over no buttons.
And that's the true magic and beauty of this console's library, is that half the games think they're phone games, and the other half of the games think they're real games for portable consoles. And then there's like a little tiny slice of games that are trying to be console games.
I will say
it's
the version
funny.
of Splinter Cell Chaos Theory on this device is surprisingly competent.
Mm-hmm. I think that I came away
isn't
with that.
It's the same version as the DS version, right?
I think so.
I in general feel like we played enough games to where we found games where clearly the developers genuinely tried to work with the technology, understood its limitations, and actually tried to work within those limitations. And those games are still pretty bad. But
yeah,
they're interesting, and we're at least talking about one of those games.
Those Ubisoft Red Links tactics games.
Those are actually
cool.
Those seemed actually neat.
Yeah.
You're not going to get out of bed for them, but
no.
Like that game High Seas.
Yeah.
That's a real video game. That's a real game.
I even think that some of the games that we played, and this is going to be the lead-in, some of these games are at least technically cool.
Just
saying
one
they're
more
perfect.
Goof. Just one more.
Okay.
One more goof. Even though the King of Fighters release for the N-Gage works, I found that it needs a trigger warning for fighting game enthusiasts because it apparently causes indescribable rage seeing King of Fighters run at that aspect ratio.
That thing is so weird. I need the FGC to get in on the N-Gage KOF game. Really break it apart. Because I believe it's based on 2002, or 2001, but there are characters that are exclusive to that game that I'm pretty sure are not in any other KOF game.
Okay.
It seems bizarre. And I mean that was also the bizarre era of SNK Playmore. That was the King of Fighters Neo Wave and KOF 11
completely owned by the Saudi Arabian
now it's
government.
owned by the Saudis. So let's talk about a game from a beloved franchise. That I was mostly surprised by because it wasn't the worst piece of shit I'd ever played.
And
Let's
it's
talk
also
about
the first RPG released for the N-Gage.
yeah.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the Elder Scrolls Travels: Shadow Key, because there were two other Elder Scrolls Travels games that were released for phone of some kind. They're phone games. They're not real. Phone games aren't real.
This
When you
game's
tell me
definitely real.
when Angry Birds is only real when I have to pay $60 for it as an Xbox One launch game.
$60 for Angry Birds? Are you sure it wasn't discounted?
$60 for Star Wars Angry Birds was an Xbox One launch title, baby.
So the Elder Scrolls Travels, it feels all right. So this is the same year or the year out. Yeah, okay. So this is the year after Morrowind came out that this
Yep.
happens.
Morrowind was 02, and then its
Oh,
expansions were 03 and 04.
okay. And so Shadow Key is late 04,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but there's no Morrowind in this game.
It's okay, because the soundtrack is just the Morrowind soundtrack compressed to hell.
So I forget if either of you looked this up. So there are actually like a shocking number of Elder Scrolls Travels games. This is the only one that really matters for us, as well as maybe tangentially talking about that canceled Oblivion PSP game, which leads me to say, so this comes out before that PSP game, clearly. And
So,
it's
Stormhold and Dawnstar are the two J2ME
Mhm.
mobile games. And Shadow Key is the one that this is the one that we care about. It is from Virtual Studios, which was a very short-lived mobile spin-off of ZeniMax.
Mhm. And this game is an almost unflinching, I'm not going to say 1-to-1 recreation of the then Elder Scrolls format into a handheld, but it's pretty close to trying to be an Elder Scrolls thing.
It is not open.
No,
No,
I mean,
it's open zone because
Yeah.
there's zones and then like caves and dungeons that go off the zones.
Yes.
Where
so
you
it's
get murdered by
essentially,
rats.
even with the open world parts, it's like an open world dungeon crawl, right, Braden?
Yes.
And that's kind of cool. I think the other thing that's worth talking about is that this is the game where I feel like it's much more transparent that your hits are connected to dice rolls, because holy shit, especially in the first couple of levels, I am just swinging and fucking missing everything.
Oh yeah, because
And
you have to look down using the 8 key
yep.
to hit the rats.
Which brings us to the problem of the number pad on the N-Gage.
The numpad.
So phone numpads and keyboard and computer keyboard numpads have the top and bottom rows switched. So on your Nokia N-Gage, 7, 8, and 9 were below 4, 5, and 6. Whereas if you were to look down at your keyboard on your computer, 7, 8, 9 is above 4, 5, and 6. Which means
Mm-hmm.
in these first-person games that use like up and down, look, the controls are inverted.
Essentially, yeah.
What are you talking about? We played this on real hardware. I'm when I say that N-Gage emulation is let's say still in a precarious state where a lot of these games are playable, not all of them.
Not all of them.
and also the emulator crashes a bunch. I'm just saying that in a general sense, because I would never endorse piracy on this podcast, except to tell people, yeah, if you want to try out N-Gage games, you can on
And
your real hardware that you own.
most of this stuff is pretty readily available and or accessible if you know where to look. Just putting it out there. Although, word of warning, and I think all of us can attest to this, the compatibility with emulating this software, which I would not know, but I have heard is not 100%.
No.
I've not heard. I don't know what you guys have heard, but it's not 100%.
It's definitely closer to, let's say, the original Xbox in terms of how much of it is covered.
So I've seen, I've only just seen this, but the version number for this software is like 0.0.9 to show the completeness of the emulation.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't know.
You
for certain.
know, not a huge audience of people trying to get Symbian stuff working, but God bless the people who are. It's not their fault they didn't have, like, Atari 50
Yeah, like
is
you're not going
responsible
to
for
get.
breaking open Jaguar emulation.
Yeah, you're not going to get someone like Atari saying, "Yeah, we're just going to make the OS open source, have at it." Also, we'll give the emulation community the lead architect behind the hardware to help you figure out how to make these things work on your computers. Like that's not happening. If I wish
So,
it would, but
I wish it would, because the world needs to play Towers 2.
Anyways, so we wanted to play more games, but we couldn't because it was a little dicey.
They just crashed.
Yeah.
Crash
But
on boot,
thankfully, the
crash
Elder
after
Scrolls
boot.
Travel Shadow Key does work.
Oh yeah, it runs fine.
I mean, it is a first-person game in the style of the Elder Scrolls games. It has the stats. It doesn't have the skills. You just pick a class. And it is first-person. The draw distance is questionable, but it is fully polygonal, and it is a first-person action RPG that is 3D, and you move around it in 3D. You get quests. The soundtrack is, as mentioned, literally just a very compressed version of the Morrowind soundtrack. So it's good.
Playing it feels more like Elder Scrolls 2 than Elder Scrolls 3. Just I guess in
Sure,
terms
that's a
of
good point.
No.
playing it.
It's definitely got some grunge to it.
Well, what I was gonna say is, hey, Braden, at least it's easier than Battlespire.
Yeah.
Because, and I actually kind of, I'm not gonna say I liked this. I'm gonna say it reminded me of an earlier era of Elder Scrolls games that had grit. Because remember how like Skyrim just gave you too many fucking fruits and vegetables and potions to eat that you didn't know what to do?
I remember how Skyrim was easy, and also here's my confession that may become relevant again at some point. Some point someone will mention this to me. The last time I played a lot of Skyrim was December of 2011. I don't think Skyrim's fine. I have never felt myself drawn back to that game.
I'll say this. I eventually got to a point to where I started to kind of sort of have fun. And that was when I made a thief rogue character that was completely reliant on bows and arrows and throwing daggers, only because bows have maybe a downright broken, sometimes it would feel passive aggressive auto aim that basically allowed you to almost always get crits.
Great.
And so that allowed me to just like snipe people pretty reliably and easily. And I'm not the first person to make this comparison. When you are no longer worried about being killed, you start to realize that this game kind of feels like a weird, like Game Jam, Ludnum Dare, Bioshock 3D demake. Because that's what it is. Once you find a winning combination, shock and wrench in Bioshock, the game doesn't really do anything to push you out of that good technique. And you just kind of like go from one vignette or one zone to the next.
Yeah. It
and
seems like a
moseying
fairly
along.
linear game. It's about a dozen hours to complete. I think the highest praise I can give it is I was expecting something a lot less functional.
I was also not expecting a game that tried to like add genuine detail to the lore of the Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
Like it's not a throwaway story. It's actually trying to do something, like fill in a genuine
Talking
gap.
about what was up in Hammerfell.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah. You know,
I'll call it a failure. I'll call this game a failure, but I kind of want to call it an admirable failure.
I'll put it this way.
They tried. They genuinely tried with this game.
Yeah. If someone paid me money, I would play it to completion.
I don't think it's that long, but yeah.
No, it's a dozen hours.
It's a shockingly big world for this type of platform.
And they are also putting in more mechanics than I would expect for a phone Elder Scrolls game.
Yeah.
This ain't no Elder Scrolls Blades, am I right, gamers?
So
remember that game? Still around.
Yeah, I was just kind of like oddly impressed with how it was a bit more functional than I thought, and B, it got most of like the Elder Scrolls itch done in such a tiny little package. Yeah. Is it good? Fuck no. No.
It's clumsy as hell. It looks bad.
And it runs like shit.
You own a device that can play Skyrim. On the go.
Several devices that can play Skyrim.
On the go.
You can play a lot of versions of Skyrim on the go.
Yeah. But it was... I'll say this. Of the things we played, I think that this was... I'm glad I played this.
Yes.
Because this was kind of, like I said, it was kind of cool to play this and see, oh, this is adorable. You made a little miniaturized version of Elder Scrolls.
Was made.
And it's like playing this made me realize, oh, this is probably why they canceled that PSP port of Oblivion, huh?
Yeah.
You kind of can't make one of these on a handheld of that era, huh?
No. You can't do the Elder Scrolls bigness on a small screen. I think that's what you say.
But, you know, kind of cool nonetheless. Like, kind of cool nonetheless.
Kind of cool nonetheless. Unlike our next game.
Well, so I'm going to make us go in chronological order because that's my bit.
Okay. Yeah.
My bit. So that was in. So the Elder Scrolls Travels Shadow Key was in November of 2004, so like a year after original launch. Like the QD was out by now. Also in fall of 2004 were a couple of Diablo clones. One which was PAL only called Barakel, where you play as Barakel, and you're saving medieval Poland from orcs or something. It's
finally
down. You just attack things. There's melee magic system. You'll level up.
It's got polygons.
It's got polygons. It functions. It's a functioning video game for the most part. Not noteworthy. in any other way. But then there's Requiem of Hell,
Yeah.
Full
a
title.
a more unhinged Diablo clone that came out worldwide. Also top down, not as polygonal. Plays less well. The combat is definitely more group based and doesn't work. But the writing is unhinged, completely unhinged writing. I recommend anyone listening to this to like look up if there's any videos on YouTube of the game. There might not be. If there are, just go look up like the opening series of cutscenes. And the I don't know what kind of mind that writing came out of, and I don't want to know. I'm not going to spoil
I don't
it.
know if it's
Are you telling
drugs
me
or
that
edgelordy
you weren't
mind.
you weren't aware of edgelordism in the year of our Lord 2004?
I mean, it's edgelordy, but like, it's I don't know how to describe the events that go on in that game.
The
You're being
Dark Lord of grim darkness and blood death.
like the grim blood death darkness hell lord kills all of humanity. Then a fairy revives your body, erases your memory, and then gaslights you into fighting a bunch of demons for this old wizard guy.
Yep.
And it's just sassy to you and negging you the whole time. It's abusive actually.
Mhm.
It's like there's it is a emotionally abusive game for the player
Finally.
character. It's being gaslit into fighting the hordes of hell in a doomed world. It's edgy, it's bizarre. You can barely play it. It's almost unplayable.
It's not the most playable Diablo clone. Also, shocking number of Diablo clones on this goddamn N-Gage. But yeah, this game's got a story that is the most interesting part of it because actually playing it sucks.
Yeah.
Um,
That's really all
part
there
of
is to
it is
say about
again needing to move your dude using that discus, which if people out there want to say that the D-pad on the 360 original 360 controller sucks ass, this fucking D-pad, this fucking little discus thing, this is the shit. Like, this is one of the worst D-pads I've ever seen. And mapping it out on anything else, not fun. It ain't great.
It's not
I'll
a
tell
good
you that
time.
much.
And so the final RPG of 2004 that I wasn't able to get working is Pocket Kingdom, Own the World. It was an MMO because N-Gage games were really big on their multiplayer. Like the N-Gage really wanted the games to have multiplayer, online multiplayer over your cell service. It's called N-Gage Arena was their online service. They really wanted as many games as possible to use it as much as possible as like a selling point. So there are actually a couple of MMOs on this thing that I never got running. So,
I
apparently
mean,
Pocket Kingdom has late speak in the writing, which I wish I could have seen.
Yes. That was the reason I remembered this game. Was I believe it was this will expose my age. GameSpot's 2004 Game of the Year awards. It was nominated for like most annoying game alongside like or most batitude.
I mean, from what I hear, like the plot itself is very self-referential, where it's about you trying to get rid of a bunch of griefers who have made the world of Pocket Kingdom shitty. And
You can't do that. That's impossible.
I
You need
heard
better
that this
moderation.
like a weird it's a weird like not sequel but sequel to a Sega Saturn game. What's this, Borgmaster Sega Saturn pervert man?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, it's considered a spiritual successor to Dragon Force.
Oh,
Yeah, through the fire and the flames. I understand.
yeah, exactly.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun,
This
dun.
is
Yeah.
Sega. Like some weird offshoot of it's like some way in which Sega took money from Nokia to make a game to a degree. Because it was produced by Sega and then programming by a division from Blue Shift, which was the developer IO Spiral. It's slightly complicated, but this is actually a Sega game on the fucking N-Gage. Like, Sega's not in the best spot in 2004, so they'll take anyone's money if you want them to make a game for your thing.
Sonic N was a launch game for the console handheld, and it's just Sonic Advance, but with that abominable aspect ratio,
Mm-hmm.
and also apparently a worse frame rate.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Pocket Kingdom, if it ever works in either your real hardware or emulation, it would be worth looking at.
Yeah. It is what it is, man. Like this at least, like it's an interesting concept. Again, another N-Gage game. At least you can squint your eyes and say, hey, you're trying something, man. Good for you. Good for you. I don't know if I want to play it though.
Speaking of which, we now move on to 2005 and the first RPG of that year. So the system was already like
Dying.
dying by this point. So everyone who was working on an N-Gage game either canceled it or shoved it out the door in 05. Much like the 3DO in 1995, but let's not talk about that.
I'm
So the
looking
first
forward to
game.
your Killing Time stream.
Oh, thank you. Next we have the game we're all here for is Xanadu Next.
Falcom.
Xanadu the Next. The next Xanadu.
Falcon Compute.
Nihon. They make mostly good games, right?
I mean, this was right during Falcom's revival period, man. They were making that Kiseki that all the kids like.
That them there Sora no Kaiseki?
Sora no Kiseki. You guys like that there girl with the twin tails and the stick?
I sure do.
She's gonna hit you.
And you're gonna
And
like
be
it.
kind of dumb about it.
So this is maybe the most look, it's a pared down version of a better game that you can now play on
Steam
PC, but this is maybe the most playable RPG we played.
This is also the most interesting TM.
Yeah, so
It's got ideas. I'm not saying it's perfect.
The Xanadu Next was actually a 2005 PC game made by Falcom to revive their dormant Xanadu series, which you can hear about in our console CRPG port grab bag series. Where we played Fa Xanadu, the first port of the first Xanadu.
That game's good.
Yeah, and that started a series of Xanadus that went dormant in the late 90s, early aughts, until it was revived as an isometric like action RPG dungeon crawler called Xanadu Next, because it was the next Xanadu. It was the next Xanadu. It was on PCs only, in Japan only, until like 2016 when it finally got translated. So you can go play it now. Even though Steam says it came out in 2016, it's a 2005 game.
It's
for whatever reason,
$3.
Yeah, so play that definitely. But what we have here on the N-Gage is a highly pared down, almost a vertical slice of like the first dungeon area in Xanadu Next. Does anyone want to take a stab at describing what's going on here?
It is an isometric action RPG that is classically inclined, looks like mud, and likes to kill you.
Hey man, the PC port also looks like mud. Hey,
Yeah.
okay, Braden, tell me if you heard this before. Nihon Falcom made a game that looks like but mechanically totally sound.
It's does it have some rockin' tunes?
Yes, the music is
Huh.
good. Hey, the one thing you can say about the N-Gage is its sound chip is better than the GBA's.
Yeah, no, you get some real good compressed versions of those Tony Hawk songs.
Just not
So
just not the one you want.
Just not
It's-
the one you want.
So this Xanadu Next is a weird, like, unique point-and-click gameplay system that's structurally similar to Diablo, but it is more of, say, it is more fill in the map and stuff. Like
It is more of a true dungeon crawler.
it's like, what if Diablo was way more like Etrian Odyssey, but it still had those clicky based combat systems. You have to kind of like point in the direction you want to move in and then point the cursor on things. There are really no complex inputs to learn. It's just click that thing until it's fucking dead. Maybe you want to use a different thing by pushing this other button to make it dead. And it's way easier on the PC because you just toy all that stuff on the F1, F2, and the function keys. But on this, it kind of sort of works. Not perfectly, but it kind of sort of works because you've got a numpad to do, shortcuts for doing special abilities and popping potions and stuff.
But even then, it's highly simplified.
Uh-huh.
Because
Yeah.
you're mostly just hitting things. In this version, there is a magic system that is almost entirely useless. So there's
Sure.
one town with 2 shops, a place to save and level up, and then you have one like small overworld area and then one dungeon. And the overworld and dungeon, it's divided up into rooms. Each room can have some number of enemies in them or a simple puzzle. If you clear the room, you get like get a bonus chest and you get like a bump in experience gain. So it's chaining cleared rooms gives you more experience as you go on. So like after you clear like 5 rooms, enemies will give you like twice as much experience per enemy. And that's how you level up. When you level up, you go to town, you get the level. There's a system of praying to gods to get, I guess, experience bonuses and the skills and abilities and magic, which you don't use. And then you're leveling up your individual attributes. And the attributes matter more for the requirements for equipment because there's like 5 pieces of equipment per slot, weapon, armor, shield.
Yeah.
They cost increasing amounts of gold, as you would expect, and they have increasing stat requirements that are kind of nonsensical, but they're there to give you an upgrade path for your leveling. And so you're going through, so you're walking slowly through these overworld and dungeon rooms, and then walking back to town, leveling, buying gear, buying potions, and whatnot. There's a very limited inventory. But the thing is, there's a tendency in Xanadu Next. I mean, first off, at first, it's very hard. Like, normal enemies will kill you in 3 hits. So it's one of those dungeon crawlers where you're dipping your toe into the combat and then going to town immediately for like the first 30 minutes of the game, probably, just to get to like level 2. So, and get, the second tier armor so you don't die immediately. And so you're gradually going on longer and longer journeys into the dungeon and then back again as you're supposed to. But for whatever reason, Falcom, either by accident or on purpose, coded in a thing where randomly a random enemy looks the same as any other enemy will have an insanely high dodge rating and kills you in one hit. So if you don't immediately realize when you're going and attacking an enemy and you're whiffing that this is like the god of the slimes you're going up against
Mhm.
and running away, the slime will turn around and one shot you.
Yeah.
And there's no autosave. You're going back to your last save. That entire run through the dungeon, it's for nothing.
Yeah, it's
And
a pretty steep difficulty curve, admittedly.
Yeah.
Even
yeah,
even
but
even when it's, let's say, properly balanced and let's say things are structured a bit more fair, I would say even then, it's a pretty steep difficulty curve.
yeah, I mean it's definitely a unforgiving game even without the slime god wandering around murking you in one hit. But with that added in, the game is almost unplayable.
It
On the N-Gage, again,
Yeah,
I
On
think
the
that
on
I
the
think the PC
N-Gage.
version
Yeah.
is a pretty decent version of the game.
the PC version is an almost entirely different game.
But on the N-Gage, hey, it has a mostly stable frame rate unless you have a bunch of projectiles going off. I think the thing that actually frustrated me is, again, another RPG where projectile skills feel way more useful than your regular sword and board. The problem is, um, your skill points are oftentimes going to severely limit your casting options. And
Yeah.
so enemy defenses really become a problem when you try to get up close on them, because there are a handful of dungeons, especially early in the game, where it feels like I'm doing nothing. I'm hitting them. It's not that they're dodging, but I'm doing nothing because, oh, wait, I didn't get this poorly communicated tell that I need to like swap shit out and take advantage of this weakness here. And the iconography in this port of the game is bad because everything's a blurry mess.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what anything does, or what any of the skills are. How the whole god praying system works. Like you can collect cards from chests,
Yeah.
and those cards will give you more gods to pray to, which
I also want to
boosts
bring up
stats.
one more thing. Falcom put out a different game in 2005 on the PlayStation Portable, I believe. No, the PC originally. Called East the Oath and Felghana. That came out in 2005 as well.
It's a bit unfair, though. But yeah, it's a vastly superior. Hey, man, those Reboot Yeast games, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, guess what? Yeah, Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky and East the Oath and Felghana both came out around this time. And so Xanadu Next is kind of just in this awkward spot.
They took money that Nokia probably paid them to make that thing.
Listen, at some point when we play Zwei or we play Brandish the Dark Revenant.
Oh,
Brandish. Or we play East versus Trails in the Sky, which is like a Smash Bros thing, but I think it would be funny if that was the Trails game we played.
Even though it's not an RPG, it's a fighting game.
Yeah, it's not an RPG, it's a fighting game.
It's still pretty fun, though.
Yeah, I would say that this version of Xanadu Next is like the Dark Souls of grimdark action RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That feels pretty apt, to be honest. But again, it's something to where the fact that it runs is kind of the miracle.
This has some of the best emulation of all the games.
Yeah. I mean, it's considered not necessarily the killer app, but it's considered like the gem, even though basically there's a better version of this game. You don't
And
need
they're
to
also
wall
better
away
games,
in
so-
your own shit.
Yeah, you can play Xanadu Next. It's on a
It's on a decent, yeah. Like I said, that PC port of Xanadu Next is, if you want to see what they tried to do there, again, go in it expecting kind of like the grungy, shitty ass, butt ass looking dungeons from those
yeah.
early reboot Nihon Falcom games, those reboot Yeast games, not the new ones. The Braden
The
knows what I'm talking about.
yes.
Um, if you go in it with that, you're gonna get a pretty good time. It's a very grind heavy focus game though.
Yeah, it's neat.
It's neat. It's also, even when you have a full set of controls that I think works well, it is just dropping traps on you, monsters that you sometimes don't have the ability to deal with given your circumstances. And it just has I think the thing that drives me crazy about that game the most is it has a weird key purchasing system to unlock different levels and different parts of this monolithic dungeon you're exploring that just fucking sucks. It's tedious as shit. But it's a
So
cool game.
it should be so then Xanadu Next for the PC hates you. Xanadu Next for the N-Gage hates you even more.
Yeah. I mean, you bought an N-Gage, you already hate yourself.
That is true.
There's
So
see, the thing about the N-Gage and thing about the N-Gage is it doesn't hold up to the imagine you were a child and your parents got you this for Christmas sniff test, because you also had to, activate it as a cell phone.
Like, a parent's not going to, unless you really went out of your way, a parent is not going to say, I'm going to buy you a cell phone that I have to go through some weird fucking extra steps to, like, get the cell phone to activate. And then also do this, do that, and this. Like,
Shout outs to my friend who got a PS2 for Christmas despite explicitly asking for a GameCube because he wanted to play Pikmin.
he got a better console.
He did. I got to play Kingdom Hearts 2 on said console.
oh no.
Oh, it was you? Okay.
No, that's how I played Kingdom Hearts 2, was on that friend's console.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, he got a better console.
No, I didn't get a PS2 until like 2009.
And I swear to God, if a GameCube person gets up in my shit for saying that the PS2 is a better console than the GameCube, I will actually lose my shit.
Listen, I was a GameCube child. I lived in the GameCube mines, okay? None of you fake pretenders being like, "Oh, I loved Double Dash." First off, no. No, you don't. You don't love Double Dash. You loved being 8.
And we all know that Billy Hatcher, the Giant Egg, is the real killer app for the GameCube.
2, listen, man. I love the GameCube a lot. It's not the PS2. Don't even pretend, man. Melee. If you are, Melee is
You're
a
poisoned.
domain of hive of scum and villainy.
Bad Katos is better than all PS2 RPGs put together. I can't finish that sentence.
If we play Bot and Kaitos, I'm going to fucking drag you onto this podcast. It's on PC now.
It's on
It's on
Switch now.
Switch.
You can play it.
No excuses.
Anyone can play it.
Monolith Soft.
The threat is
Oh
there.
yeah, the Monolith Soft, everybody's really itching to play, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, listen, if we're going to play a Monolith Soft game, there's a third Xenosaga that we are unfortunately on the hook for.
Oh boy,
At some point.
I love it. So
Okay,
excited.
so after the
Next
Xanadu
game.
is now you can talk about the other Diablo clone.
The Roots. So I'll say this: The Roots is apparently only I got it to work. It is a top down. Hear me out. Top down, mostly polygonal hack and slash game with loot. Huh?
Go
Okay.
on.
You pick from a series of different classes. I picked the archer, and I had abilities such as shooting an arrow or shooting a cooler arrow. I couldn't figure out how to summon my monster
What?
pet, but that was a skill I had learned.
Okay.
Because, once again, the controls for this thing. Not since the Atari Jaguar has a numpad been used for such evil in video game space. Anyway, yeah, it's just a Diablo type game. It seemed entirely playable and entirely forgettable. We didn't even
Mhm.
talk about those X-Men Legends games that were original games that
Oh, I
were
got those working.
oh
I got
yeah,
the
I
X-Men
played
Legends
those.
games.
They're bad. They're
they're
really
Yeah,
bad.
they
it's like the worst version of X-Men Legends 2. And I know that X-Men Legends 1. And I know
And
we
two.
had this weird like Mandela effect thing, but just to clarify, there is no GBA port of X-Men's Legends 1. There is no GBA port of X-Men Legends 2. I don't know why people are convinced that both of those
we
games have a
yes
GBA port. They don't
because
exist. They
yeah
don't exist.
because I
It's
think the
Bernstein
reason we
Bears
got
all over again.
Mandela affected by that was because those X-Men Legends games look like they would be shitty GBA ports of a console game.
I mean, at the time they were fine.
Yeah, but
They're
These
about
weird.
giving people an action RPG experience with comic book characters that they
no,
care
to
about
be
because they're their
clear,
kids.
I think X-Men Legends 1 and 2 A-okay. The one you
I even
want is
like
Marvel
Marvel.
Ultimate Alliance,
I like
but
Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1, even though, as we talked about, it's just got a bunch of fiddly bullshit that
and
is
also
just
it's
that game.
I'm deathly afraid of going back to it because I think it would make me sad. How
But
Always so
simple it
fun.
is. But
Got Moon Knight
this
in it.
N-Gage game,
So bad. Both of them are so bad.
they're bad. They're like a
so this is where I feel like so we've dealt with games that were built from the ground up. We've dealt with games that are basically glorified GBA ports of games,
But
then
we
transferred
still have
over
one
to the
left.
N-Gage. And well, with X-Men Legends, it feels like they took a console game to try and put it on here, and this is the worst type of N-Gage game. Are the console games that get like downported to a degree?
Silly, because
Because
again,
this game,
Chaos Theory.
sure, but this game is unplayable. X-Men Legends 1 on the N-Gage is fucking unplayable.
Oh yeah, no, you can't play it. And I think they built a version of that game from the ground up for the N-Gage. That's why it feels like a bad GBA port. Because it's not
yeah.
the console game. It doesn't have the systems of the console game. It's its own thing, just from the same premise as the console game. But worse in ways that you cannot possibly imagine, dear viewer. Like it's unplayable. Like the combat doesn't work. Nothing works. It
It's a
looks
weird
terrible.
isometric brawler that looks like butt and plays like butt.
And again, the nice thing about these X-Men Legends games is you get into combat situations, you just mash the buttons or a simple combo, ABB, AAB, whatever, and you just get this immediate feedback. And because this game runs so freaking slowly, you don't get that feedback.
You also don't get the part of X-Men Legends and MUA that was good, which was you have up to 3 of your friends join locally.
I think you said
And
online play.
oh, I'm sure it probably had online play.
But yeah, it
The
doesn't.
only multiplayer I would like to try out should it ever get done, in with the real N-Gage hardware we have. I would like to see what multiplayer in that Elder Scrolls game is like.
Man, really? You're going to do that to us?
No, I'm not, because it's never going to happen. I'm going to forget about it. That's
Speaking of forgotten
that of
things.
course I said that, but also I just remembered that last year for Extra Life we sure, or was it the community endurance run? We sure did play through Resident Evil Outbreak on
Yeah, you
community
did.
run servers. So
Mm-hmm.
never say never.
I mean, we sure did do that, man.
Hey man, Outbreak is neat.
Yeah?
And that
It,
moves us along to our last RPG on the N-Gage. Came
yes.
out in late 2005, in the waning days of Nokia as a world power.
Okay.
Is Rift's Promise of Power. This is a
Yeah.
tactical role playing game with set in a urban fantasy, post apocalyptic urban fantasy,
Cyber.
cyberpunk post apocalyptic urban fantasy thing.
It's
Uh,
something.
it's something. Basically, there's magic and interdimensional aliens, and the world's ended, and it's post apocalypse, but everything's cyber. Uh, the town areas look kind of like Fallout, like the original Fallout's. The game plays not quite like XCOM, like somewhere between XCOM and Final Fantasy Tactics almost. But like you have like
Yeah.
laser
Yeah.
guns and like grenades and that kind of thing. It seems neat. It's very story driven. The combat works better than you think it would. I didn't play as much of it as I wanted to. I just want to point out that Rift's Promise of Power exists, and it's neat. It's a neat thing.
Hooray. That's I feel like the greatest takeaway for most of these games is some of them are neat, some of them are I'm surprised this functions at all, and some of them are this is exactly what I thought it would be.
I don't know. I think watching Borgmaster play those tactics games made me realize that those tactics games might
Yeah.
actually be functional video games of all
Yeah.
things. Like those seemed
I
like the
yeah.
most feature rich
I believe those are also
functional
the most
products.
beloved games on the platform. Are
Yeah,
those
like
Red Link's tactics games?
yeah, because Red Links, the Trials people put out like a pirate Advanced Wars knockoff called High Seas. Works completely fine. They did some World War II. That one where you're like a mercenary commandos.
Oh,
Uh,
Jagged Alliance.
Jagged Alliance. Yeah, so they play kind of like the Jagged Alliance, but they're World War II games. The Pathway to Glory series. It's a series. There's two of them by Red Links. Red Links put out 3 games on the N-Gage, and they're all among the best N-Gage games.
Imagine how much more beloved they would be if they were put out on the GBA or the DS.
More so, almost certainly. There'd be a weird niche high seas fandom if it came out on the GBA. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that brings us to the end. There's also a weird racing game called System Rush, which is like a cyberpunk hacking game, but the hacking is done as like a Wipeout style, like combat racing thing, like a Tron world. It's very story based. It's weird. It crashed on me in the second race, as you do. But that's notable as well. Uh, at this point, I'm just saying notable N-Gage games. There's that weird Warhammer 40k game, which is like one of the last N-Gage games ever released. That goes way into being like tabletop accurate, more so than it needs to be.
Yeah. That thing seemed bizarre in as much as it seemed maybe the closest to tabletop Warhammer. Sort of Advanced Warsy, but very similar to tabletop Warhammer in kind of its ideas, which has always been a Games Workshop no-no. They want you to spend $120 on a starter pack army set.
I had a decent time with Operation Shadow, and there is a good Splinter Cell game. It's the Splinter Cell Team Stealth Action by Gameloft. I found.
Wait, with the side scroller, that game's not
Yeah,
good.
I thought that
Chaos
game
Theory
was
one is
better
good.
than the fucking Splinter Cell Chaos Theory game.
No, the Chaos Theory port is way more functional than that side scroller. That side scroller is barely playable.
But anyways, there are. Okay, hot take. It's not worth it, guys. Look, game preservation and all that shit. Exploring the N-Gage and its catalog of video games. You're fine. We did it. You're fine. If it's not in your brain and you don't know what the N-Gage is,
If you
I think
want
that
to
you're
see
okay.
the single worst version of Crash Nitro Kart humanly possible, then go look up the N-Gage version.
I'm gonna say, as far as the historical preservation or even car crash aspects of this platform are concerned, I don't think a lot of it's interesting enough. I think the most interesting things were Xanadu and that Elder Scrolls game, but neither of them is like
Good.
good.
Let's be honest, neither is good.
And it's not like the Jaguar, where now that the Jaguar, you can play the entirety of the Jaguar library with near hardware perfect accuracy. There's a real they had no idea what they were doing, and this entire thing is on fire aspect to the Jaguar that I find really compelling.
Yeah.
Make sure to read my blog series on the Jaguar for more.
Boy, howdy.
But at least with the Jaguar, there's the emulation on the Jaguar has been solved. And so if you want to check out the Jaguar, it's shockingly easy to do. This was not worth the amount of effort we went into to like set this shit up and to try and get this hardware to this software to cooperate and like get like
it's like an hour,
1% working.
Just to get it working.
It's not worth it.
Only half the games
not worth it.
It takes like an hour and a half of just going through obscure wikis trying to figure out how to install this thing.
Like, it wasn't... Braden, come on, man. Was this worth it? Was the amount of effort we went into to play, like, 1% or 10% of the N-Gages, was it worth it?
No.
I played, like, 60% of the library. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I didn't. I only played the RPGs.
You got stuff out of it. But I don't know if it was worth it.
I mean, I got a lot out of this experience. This is also my pick, by the way. So
yeah. As I said, I'll play that Elder Scrolls game to completion if someone throws enough money at me. That's true for many things. I have to play fucking Sonic Heroes this month.
Yeah, you do.
Because people donated to the children.
But I don't know, man. Like, if there was at least one game that I truly felt like was cool enough, right? I would say check that one thing out. Even in the case of Xanadu Next, just play the Steam port. Just play the modern PC port. It's a more full-fledged video game. You
It's
don't
the
have to
actual
like
version
worry
of
about.
the game.
Oh, here's the other thing. My hand still fucking hurts. My hand hurts.
Oh yeah, because in the emulation, the D-pad goes to the arrow keys, so you're doing the arrow
Yeah.
keys and
Yeah.
your computer number
And the
pad,
numpad, yeah. It's
and just like there's no way to make that ergonomic at all.
no,
No.
it's not great. Listen, if you're the kind of person who is hunting down N-Gage emulation, there's nothing we can do to stop you. But don't.
You got to be a sicko. And look, if you're one of those sickos where it's like, I got to play all of the video games, like I need to know all of them and like what they're like and, you know,
Play the
how they play.
3DO.
I mean,
Yeah. So, dude, the 3DO has a
The
couple of
3DO
games.
has Dr. Hauser.
the 3DO has Guardian Wars on it.
Okay.
And Steel
Now,
the
we got Borg here, so we can actually press him about this. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you rather play the N-Gage or the CDI?
Oh. So I actually
Braden.
looked into CDI
The N-Gage,
emulation
because
recently.
the CDI is all FMV trash.
The CDI is mostly like weird
Multimedia edutainment shit.
Yeah.
and like stuff for like car
And
dealerships
softcore pornography, as we learned.
and some software
Oh, yeah.
pornography. But no, the N-Gage. I'd rather have the N-Gage and the CDI.
There seemed like maybe half a dozen interesting, if not great, games on the N-Gage.
Yeah, like 5 to 10 games that you could play on the N-Gage. Nothing on the CDI. Nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm trying to think, what's the step up from the CDI? Is it the Jaguar or is it the 3DO?
It's the Jaguar.
Jaguar.
Okay,
Because
so-
the 3DO has legitimately good games on it, even if a lot of them are PC
out of
port.
date. Yeah. Okay, so Borg, would you play the Jaguar or the N-Gage first?
Jaguar.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that there are genuinely more interesting games on the Jaguar.
As I
than
said, the
this.
train wreck aspect of the Jaguar puts
All right.
it over
Well,
the top.
no,
for
if
me.
we're thinking about like bad failed like handhelds, would you play the Atari Lynx or the N-Gage?
I mean, the Atari Lynx is neat.
The Atari Lynx, yeah, I'll take that over. I mean, there's more games to look at on the Atari Lynx.
Yeah.
And the emulation is much easier.
Yeah. Once
yeah,
again,
so I'll
Atari
take the Lynx,
50 gave me exactly as much respect for the Atari Lynx as it deserves,
which is more than the N-Gage.
which is more than the N-Gage. For one, the aspect ratio on the Atari Lynx is not bug fuck insane.
It has a real aspect ratio for one thing.
It has a real aspect ratio.
So, I guess Braden Borg, this is the worst console we've played for Off the Deep End. Then,
I mean,
right?
you played, yeah.
I mean, for our podcast.
Yeah, for our podcast. Yeah, I would say
I see an Amiga game on this list.
Oh, the Amiga is a computer.
the Amiga's a
that
real
has-
computer. All right. So I
All right,
think
let's
the
rank the-
ones
so
we
which
wanted to
games did-
rank were Xanadu Next and Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let's start. Okay, is the Elder Scrolls Travels Shadow Key better or worse than
The Tower
the
of
Super
Druaga.
Spy?
Oh.
The Tower of Druaga. I would say it's better than the Tower of Druaga.
Yeah, because the Tower of Druaga is a fucking misery. It's
It's one of the
miserable.
most important misery factories ever made.
So, is Elder Scrolls Travels Shadowkey better or worse than Anthem?
Fuck.
I mean, I'd rather play Anthem
Okay.
again.
I honestly would rather play Anthem. I know, Braden, it
Yeah,
hurts you
okay.
to admit
Yeah,
that,
okay.
but
All right, yeah. Congratulations to our new number 57, the Elder Scrolls Travel Shadow Key.
All right, so
And then
Xanadu next.
let's do
N-Gage. Is Xanadu next for the N-Gage better or worse than Quest 64?
I would rather play Quest 64.
Is it better or worse than Mass Effect and Andromeda?
Uh
I'd say it's worse.
it's worse.
Is it better or worse than Elix 2?
It's
fuck.
worse.
Is it better or worse than Anthem?
I would rather play Anthem.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better or worse than the Elder Scrolls Travels Shadowkey?
It's worse.
Is it better or worse than the Tower of Druaga?
Here's the line. I think it's better than that fucking Lord of the Rings GBA game.
Oh God.
I think it goes right below Shadow Key.
I mean, we're debating like two games that are functionally don't
Poo-poo.
work.
Yeah.
Also, you need to specify that's the N-Gage version of Xanadu next.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I'm willing to put it above. Okay, Braden, hear me out. I'm willing to put
Yeah.
it above the GBA game of the Third Age, only because, like I said, the whole like 3-lane system on that game
It's like
is
a
genuinely
weird half-baked tactics. Okay, congratulations to our new number 58. Xanadu next for the N-Gage, not to be confused with Xanadu next for the PC.
okay.
A game that is definitively better than the Tower of Druaga.
That's right. All right,
Ugh.
yeah, we've clearly learned so much from this and have not become more nihilistic people. But you know what's fun? Know what's fun?
What?
Fan picks.
Oh.
Everyone loves fan picks. The
We're
fans
doing
especially.
another fan pick because I feel obligated to do more fan picks. And we're gonna get through them. And so we're doing Legend of Legaia.
Okay.
Gino Grieco, one of the 3 PS1 games I played as a wee little lad, says this game's still good. Let's find out together.
Okay.
You can yell at us on the Discord if you give us money on Patreon. If you give us $3 on Patreon, you can learn about our anime podcast, the Oji-san Cast, where Chris and I talk about anime with Pete. We talked about Boogie Pop Phantom, which is a difficult game to talk about.
A game?
Yeah. No, Boogie Pop Phantom, it's shut up. Shut up. Anime.
What are you going to watch
Anamisi
Dot Hack
Foshiz.
Stein?
Okay.
Probably soon.
Good.
We're watching Big O for March. March's anime is going to be Big O. But Dot Hack Sign is on the list. Borkmaster, where can people find you?
They can find me at fifthgengaming.blog or Fifth Generation Gaming on Twitch, or the Giant Bomb forums if you want to read the blogs there. I write about 32-bit game consoles such as the Atari Jaguar, or the 3DO, or the PlayStation. You might not have heard of the PlayStation. It was this niche console that came out in the 90s. But you can read
I
about
heard
it.
the Jaguar was 64 bits. Do the
That-
math.
Yes, do the math. You are not ready.
Yeah.
All the greatest hits. Especially the Sega Saturn. That really
Especially
just,
the Sega Saturn.
especially the Sega Saturn.
Hey man, the Saturn is cool.
Yeah.
It's a console for freaks,
Especially in Japan.
especially in Japan.
Four.
yeah.
All right. So.
You can
You can find me there.
you can find me on the Twitch under this name, Arbitrary Water. You can find ZP on the Twitch.
Yep.
Under the name Zombie Pie. Thank you to SuperSex420 for the use of our theme song. And thank you at home for listening to us lose our will to live. There's no such thing as cheating in a single-player game.